today changes my whole entire life.
Welcome to Gritability, a podcast about the power of perseverance, overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds to attain the life of your dreams. I'm your podcast host, Adam Clausen. With me in the studio is the beautiful and ever radiant Ro Clausen.
Hello, Gritty family. I am so excited for today's episode. We have an amazing guest who's here with us on Zoom, Michael Santos. And although he does not believe that he's famous within this community of people, the prison community, the prison wife community, he is absolutely 100% a celebrity among us. So I'm going to give you guys a little bio, and then I'll turn it back to Adam to start the interview. Michael Santos is an investor, a speaker, an advocate for criminal justice reform, and a successful entrepreneur. He creates learning resources to teach strategies and tactics others can use to become more successful as investors, as business owners, and in life. Michael has an unusual but well-documented path from struggle to success. His journey includes 26 years in prison to becoming a successful, law-abiding, contributing citizen. He's authored many books and courses and teaches strategies that justice-impacted people can use to prepare for success after prison. Michael, welcome to Gritability. We're honored and happy to have you join us for our very first live episode. Now, I found Michael years ago. Michael, it's really funny because I found you because the person who introduced Adam and I was reading your books prior to me meeting Adam. And she was like, oh my God, you got to hear this. You got to hear this. And it kind of gave us like a foundation of what to expect. But then when Adam and I were talking before the episode, I could not for the life of me remember how you and I met and became friends. Adam remembers, so I'll pass it over to you, but I have no recollection of you and I when we first became friends. Do you remember?
Well, I think the real celebrity here is you and Adam. And I was probably in my biz dev mode, always looking for people that are influencing in a positive way people in prison. And I found the Strong Prison Wives channel, which was really inspiring to both Carol and me because your messaging to help keep the family together during challenging times really meant a lot to us. It resonated with us, and I'm sure that's how I found it. And I likely reached out to you because that's typically what biz dev people do. We just reach out, and I just learned more about both you and Adam, and we found that to be a resource that not only inspired us, but that we could use to help the hundreds of thousands of people that we try to reach inside of institutions.
Well, I just want to add to this because what was not included in that bio is just that Michael has been an amazing friend to us, and that above all else, right? Like when we were still on the inside, still going through challenges, Michael was always there. You have been an inspiration. You have served as a mentor. And believe me, when I got out, there was a lot of people that thought, they questioned this happy ending, if it would ever happen. And, a lot of people didn't know how to respond when we first got out. But you were right there. You were one of the first people who were like, what do you need? What can I do to help you guys? And again, opening up this segment, you're like, hey, I'm here to help. That's why we keep coming back to you. That's why you're one of the people that we want in our circle. So grateful to be here, spending time with you today, and really have been looking forward to this conversation since the moment we put it on the books, since we locked it in. And as Rose said, this is our first live. We're live streaming right now, so this is very cool. And it's fitting to have you on as our first guest to do that. So thanks.
I'm honored to be here.
Oh man, this is great. I want to share my story on what I recall, because I already knew about you from your books. And for me, when I was on the inside, I was determined to figure out how to do things differently because I did everything the wrong way. That's how I ended up back in prison. So I made it my business to study people who were successful in prison and then got out and did amazing things on the outside. And obviously, you were one of the people at the forefront. Like, you just have an amazing story, and we'll get into that in a minute. But that was an inspiration to me. That's why I really gravitated towards your message. And I vividly recall the day that Professor Tony Gaskew, head of the Criminal Justice Department at University of Pittsburgh, he comes in. We're doing this victim impact class. We've got over 100 guys in the chapel, right? First of all, to get staff to go along with this, because it's security risk, and how are you going to let all these guys in there? And they're asking Gaskew, the professor, like, you're going to be alone in there. Are you comfortable with that? Like, do we need to have extra security? And we're talking about topics on race and the system, like charged topics. Gaskew was masterful in working the room and in the flow of the conversation. And I remember he walked in this day and he's like, man, you're going to love this one. And he brings in, he's got this stack of handouts, and he was always giving us different resources. And it was one of your articles that had just been published that you had written. And he passed this thing around. And I'm telling you, that entire room, when they started reading who you were, that you were on the outside, that you had this article that was published and the amazing things that you were doing, I'm telling you, the energy in that room, just like, man, it was amplified. It turned it up like 10 notches. Conversation that ensued, like, everybody left there super inspired that day. And I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, I need to be that inspiration. And I mean, you set the bar high, and I'm still following. I'm still, following your lead. So I'm eager to hear where you're headed now, what you have on the agenda going forward. But before we jump too far into it, I want to hit a little bit on some things that people probably don't ask you. A lot of people know your story, 26 years, as Ro mentioned, but we're always interested in getting into like the past, like what shaped you at an early age to prepare you for that 45-year sentence that you received? Because I watched a lot of guys with a lot of time, as soon as they got it, they went a different route. Like, they threw in the towel, they gave up, but not you. You took a very different path. What was it that shaped you?
So ironically, it was a correctional officer that actually shaped me. I was locked in the hole because I was facing life without parole. I was 23 years old, and I was charged with drug trafficking. I was charged with leading what's called a continuing criminal enterprise. And this is at the dawn of the war on drugs, a long time ago. Ronald Reagan was still in the White House, and I didn't understand prison at all. But because of the length and the severity of the potential sentence, and I was held in pretrial, I was held in the hole. So, in the beginning, the only thing you want is to get out of prison. And, I made every bad decision a guy could make. I refused to accept responsibility. I went to trial. I perjured myself on the witness stand and said I didn't do it when I was in fact guilty. So it was when I was convicted on all counts and facing life that I remember being back in my cell, and a correctional officer, I really wish I could go back and thank him. Yeah, but I mean, his name was Officer Wilson. So all I can do is try to pay tribute to him whenever I get an opportunity to speak, because that's all I know about him is Officer Wilson from 1987 in a detention center. And you know how those little narrow windows are. He came to the window and he leans in and he said, well, how'd it go? And I said, not so well, dude. I got convicted of all counts. And he said, I might have a book to help you. And he brought me a book. And he brought me several of them, but I don't remember which was the first one, but I remember it was the story of Frederick Douglass that really got me on a path of wanting to be different. And what Frederick Douglass's story, for those who may not know, I didn't know who Frederick Douglass was when I walked in, but he was born into slavery. And as a man that was born into slavery, you'd think the only thing he wants to do is get away and be free. But Frederick Douglass, as I interpreted the story, he escaped when he was about 20 years old. And instead of going on to live his life in liberty and freedom, he decided to really become a voice for the opposition of slavery. And to do that, he had to teach himself how to read, how to write, how to speak effectively. And then he used his own personal life story. He wrote 3 biographies, and then he used those biographies to become a tool that would help him influence others on the reasons that slavery was bad. And that inspired me to say, I've got to figure out how to do that, to use my time in here in a manner that make me a worthy candidate at some point in the future to work towards something better and improving the outcomes of this system. And that story inspired me to go through prison and focus on working to become a better communicator, a better writer, a better speaker, and then use a personal story of going through prison and become gritable and persevere. And so I would attribute Officer Wilson to being that influential person who helped me, I think, see prison differently. I remember I'd already been in prison for about a year in the hole or in custody for about a year. I hated custody. I hated it so much that I wanted to do better. And not only for myself, but hopefully help other people make better decisions and reach their highest potential regardless of where they're held. And that's what got it started. And then, Officer Wilson gave me a few other books, that really helped me, including books on Socrates and who else was very influential? Nelson Mandela. He was getting out of prison around the time that I was going in. He had about a year to go, but he used to bring me all types of articles about him. And I remember, I went in 87. I think Mandela got out around 90 or 89 or so. But, he was, of course, really well known. And he had a long sentence. It was hard to find people at that time that had been in prison for longer than a quarter century because, there was parole when I went to prison. So very few people served, 20 years or better. And I was looking for inspiring figures that had gone through, multiple decades in prison, and I look to them as role models, much as many people look to you as a role model.
Well, I appreciate that, and talk about a full circle moment, because everything you just said, as far as looking for those examples, I did the same, and unfortunately I came in a little bit later, and all of those sentences, those harsh mandatory minimums, like I was one of those people. I was a recipient, 213 years, and I had to find people like you to give me some sort of hope that this wasn't the end and that I could find some meaning and purpose within that existence. So you were a big part of that inspiration. The things that you did in prison, for me, some things that stand out, we talk about gritability being a skill, right? It's something that can be cultivated. And you and I are very much aligned. All 3 of us are very much aligned on this. Workouts, right? Physical challenge building, mental fortitude. Tell us about some of those journals that you kept as far as with workouts and what influence that had on ultimately bigger picture, the things you've accomplished in your life.
Well, I was pretty young when I started. I was 23. And, like I said, I was in the hole for a year, and then I went to a USP, a high security penitentiary. And at that time, it was different. There were only 30,000 people or so in federal prison when I went in. So there were only like 6 USPs around the country, and everybody kind of knew everybody because they'd get transferred around. And, it was a very violent prison, and exercise was helpful to me, not only in terms of mental fortitude, but also safety. For me, it was very important to be fit as a young man in prison. And the discipline, I think, contributes to mental health. It contributes to making a person feel as if he has some control over his life, because the prison system is really always taking control away. For me, that strategy carried me through the 9,500 days I served in prison in the beginning, but it changed, because life evolves. In the beginning, I would say the first 10 years, it was all about getting to be as physically strong as you could with weights and so on. And then as I grew older, I was my mid 30s, it switched to more, they started taking weights away in different prisons. And that was very challenging mentally when you were so into something and then they take it away. So I had to find some other way. And that began my kind of transition into being a runner. And then that carried me through the last 10, 15 years or something like that, where I started to become a really long distance runner and ran many really long distances in prison. My last month I ran, I think, wasn't it 700 miles? I think it was 700 miles, like an average of 30 miles a day, every day. I ran, I don't know,
wait. Average of 30 miles a day.
Yeah, I was really into it. I mean,
wow.
I would get really inspired by people I'd read, and I'd have to say, I'm going to do this. I can find a way to do it. And you have to do it in multiple shifts because of the counts and so on. But I started running marathons because a friend of mine challenged me to run a marathon when I was in like my 22nd or third year. I used to run a lot of 20 miles and so on, but I was just really never into running a marathon until this guy said, I want to run a marathon before I get out. I said, let's do it this weekend. And that kind of pushed me to do that. And he actually ran it faster than I ran it, which was pretty impressive for him because he'd only been in prison for 9 months and he came in really overweight and he lost a lot of weight. And that prompted me to want to run 2 marathons in one day. And I did that, got in trouble from my wife. And because she said I could die from it or something, I didn't know that. So I ran 53 miles in a day.
Oh my God.
And then I really enjoyed it because it was like an escape mechanism. And that carried me through. And then a buddy of mine had climbed Mount Everest. And so I said, oh, if you can climb Mount Everest, I'm going to run. It was my last month of prison. I initially said I was going to run 500 miles that month. I typically would run 400 miles a month. And then that last month, I did the 500. I was on track to crush the 500 miles. So I said, I'm going to boost this to 700 miles. And I did it. And it was super fulfilling. Got me super excited to do that. So, there's a lot of funny stories I can remember. Now I've almost been home for 10 years. So it'll be 10 years for me in August. And, you just go through iterative changes in life. And I learned to do that in prison and I still do it today.
I love this.
Wow.
And there's so much grittiness to this story. And not only, the physical challenges are amazing. And you guys in prison, your physical challenges are, I agree with Carol, ridiculous and scary for us on the outside that have to hear about it usually after the fact, thankfully after the fact. But something you said that I want to touch on when you were telling that story was you said they started taking out the weights and things changed because life evolves. That's just life, right? And that's such a great way to look at life, period. Inside prison, outside of prison. It's a gritty way to look at things because a lot of people shut down when things change and they get so fearful of it. And the fact that you just said, well, that's life and that's what happens inside, outside, and I just went with it and I changed up what I was doing. Couldn't lift weights, so I started to run. I see you're trying to say something.
No, I'm just, people have heard me tell this story about going out and running a marathon in prison. Same thing. I had it as a challenge. I'm like, I'm going to do something that nobody else is doing. And you set the bar so high. I knew that you had done a ton of miles. I remember reading that and I was like, damn, I thought what I did, and I did 30 miles in one day.
You know how the documentation began, Adam? It's a kind of a funny story. So I have a partner. His name is Justin Paperny, and I met him in prison. And Justin was a real athlete. He played in baseball really competitively in many World Series as college and Little League, and he was at USC. And a lot of guys, Adam, you can relate to this. Guys come to prison for 3 or 4, 6 months, and they really feel as though they know a lot about prison. and I'm sitting with Justin one day, and I remember in the morning, and he'd say, and I was running a lot, but I was running probably 5 days a week. And I remember him saying, people would turn to him because he was a really gifted athlete. and they'd ask him about exercise and recovery. And I remember him saying, your body needs to recover. You can't do this, push your body every day. And I said, that's bullshit. Of course you can. He said, and I said, I could do it every day. And he said, well, you'll hurt yourself. I said, well, let's put it to a test. So I said, I could run every day. So I said, I'll run 10 miles a day every day for 100 days just to prove you wrong. And he said, oh, you'll never make it. I said, okay, that's fine. Let's try it. So I started running every day. And by the time I'd done it for like 15 or 18 days, I said, I like it better. I said, in fact, I'll run 10 miles every day. I said, I'll run 10 miles every day until you go home. And he only had like a year. And so then I started going, I'm like in it for like 50 days, and I'm recording it every day on these journals because I was very methodical about keeping journals. And then I said, this is awesome. I said, I'm going to run every day 10 miles until I go home. And I had like 1,000 days left or 1,100 days left. And I never took a day off from that moment on. And I remember my wife, and I'm recording it, how much I'd like to start the year. So I'm going to run, I don't remember what it was, like 3,000 miles or something, or 3,500 miles this year. And then I'd track it. And then I'd always try to beat the goal. So it was very methodical and empowering because you're doing what people say you can't do. And I learned to do that all through prison in many different ways. And that has been a strategy that keeps me self-directed and self-motivated. And so it started with Justin. I attribute it to him.
That's so funny. You guys are so much more alike than I knew you were alike, but so much more alike than I realized. I'll tell you, Justin's a friend of ours as well, and I'll tell you a funny story. I do remember the first time Justin and I spoke. He wanted to do some work together, and we had this call, and he didn't know much about my background. He just knew I coached prison wives, and he wanted me to work with the white-collar wives. So he asked me, and I'm telling him a little bit about the background, and I said, my husband's serving a 213-year sentence, and I know in prison, typically they count time in months. And he goes, you mean months? And I said, no, I mean years. And he's like, no, you mean months. And then I said, no, I do mean years, but I don't think he could fathom that I understood that Adam actually had 213 years because they count in months. And he wound up calling a mutual friend to kind of like be like, is this girl does she have it all together? Like, is she right? But yeah, that's great. That's a great story. I love that running story. That's something Adam would do.
Listen, that's gold right there.
Yeah.
That speaks to everything that we've talked about on this podcast to date. That sense of empowerment, using those physical challenges to take control of your life. If you don't like something, do differently, right? Go out and do something you've never done before. Don't allow other people to set those limits on you and tell you that you can't do something. I mean, that's a crazy goal, right? I'm going to run 10 miles every single day until you go home. And he said he only had like a year left.
I picked up on that too.
For normal people out here, right? A year is a long time in prison, right?
I don't mean to diminish that. Of course.
No.
It's just when you're like, we have a different I had a very different perspective about time. Yep. I never diminished what somebody else had. Anytime you're away from the people you love or the people who love you, it's very difficult. But I was taking it back to that time when I was probably in my 23rd or 24th year or something like that. And I had like 3 years to go. I didn't know when I was getting out because I was from a different law. And, so I knew I was getting out 24, 25, 26 years. I wasn't quite certain. Turned out to be 26, but, you just look at life differently at that stage, certainly differently than I look at it now.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations where, I always said the same thing to the wives on the outside. One day is a lot to be away from your loved one, and I get it, and I'm not diminishing what you go through. However, if I could do it for this long, and you guys did it for as long as you did, then you can't really complain if you have a year or whatever it is. So
yeah, true. It's all about perspective. And you said you've been out 10 years now. So
in August, it'll be 10 years.
Congratulations.
Yes. Congratulations in advance. I'm coming up on 3. I know what that feels like. As I said, you've been leading this whole time. Like, I'm following. I know when you walked out the door, like, good analogy here, you hit the ground running. You were running every day I don't think you stopped, both figuratively and literally, when you walked out the door. You had a plan in place. You've executed. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so I was 49 when I got out of prison. And I remember it was really important for me to do a lot of things. I felt super well prepared when I got out. I mean, I had a lot of opportunities that I'd created while I was in prison. And I remember, it was really important for me to be, I had to think when you get out of prison at 49 and you go in at 23, you're really focused on retirement, and there's a short window. Financial resources were super important to me. But it was also important, that fitness goal. And I had a lot of mentors. And one of them, the guy that actually pushed me to run the first marathon, his name is Greg Reyes, a super inspiring guy. If any of you have the opportunity to listen to his podcast, or not his podcast, but he's a subject of a podcast. If you Google him, you could find him. He was a CEO of a really big company, and we became very good friends in prison. When I got out, I was approaching 50, and I was thinking about what I would do when I was 50. And I told him, I said, I'm going to run a new marathon every week for 50 weeks. I'm going to run them in 50 different cities. And I was like setting this crazy goal. And I remember him saying, look, you're about 50, so I think it's time for you to start making some money and not thinking about, oh, you're not in prison anymore. You'd better start thinking about making some money, and I don't think you're going to make it running marathons. And that brought me kind of a shift in focus to really focus more on the businesses that I needed to build. And it accelerated my pursuit of biz dev and lessened my focus. I don't remember when I stopped running every day, because in the beginning I was still obsessed with it. And Carol, my wife is sitting out there. Do you remember when I kind of got off? I said, I used to have these little Fitbits that I'd wear on my hand, those Nike things, to make sure I was doing enough steps and this and that. And yeah, I don't remember when it was, but there was a day that I said, I can't run today. I got too much to do. And that happens now. That still happens now, where you've got to learn in my business, Dev. And so when I'm talking about, I said, to succeed, you've got to have a plan that'll lead you to success, but you also have to be able to set priorities. And sometimes those priorities shift. And there came a time when my priorities shifted. And then, you've got to build your tools, tactics, and resources, but they always have to align with how a person defines success. And so fitness is always important to me, but there are times when I will, like if I'm traveling and I know I've got to be at the airport at, 3 or 4 in the morning, and then get in a car and drive 4 hours to a prison to go present, and then be in top shape the next day, fitness might not be, my running may not be the priority that day. And I've learned to have to focus always on the goal and not be with the same level of obsessiveness that I think drove us when we were in prison.
What I'm hearing is a little bit of flexibility, because it sounds like your priorities are still your priorities. But those priorities will shift.
Yeah. Like right now, for the past 6 months or so, I've been on a really extensive travel schedule that has really interfered with my personal life. And now, I'm home, working from home, and have a lot of responsibilities. But now that I'm working from home, things are shifting where I've got the ability to, and I work 7 days a week. So I have more flexibility when I'm at home than if I'm traveling. But you've got to always be able to focus on what's important to you and how are you going to execute on hitting those goals.
I love that. And it's such great advice that we need to heed, because you still look incredibly healthy and incredibly in shape. And I think, we always...
My wife is just telling me I got fat.
we always go.
You're looking
you look
great, Michael. You're looking
You
great.
look extremely healthy, and we always go back to like our tip top condition. I always compare myself back to when I used to go do fitness competitions when I was on stage, and that's just not, like you said, that's not my priority right now. I don't have the time and the energy and the resources day in and day out to do that, nor do I want to. And I think for you guys to compare yourself back to where you were in prison, like you said, that you just can't. Who has time to run 2 marathons a day or a marathon a day every single day when you're trying to make money? And I remember when Adam was maybe 4 or 6 weeks from prison, like literally, I don't think it was more than 6 weeks. I know it wasn't because I wasn't pregnant yet. We met you for dinner, and you told us that you were still running a little bit at that point. At that point, I thought it was every day. You were running down to the beach, and then you were going for a swim, and I'm like, my God, like, how does he do it all? How does he basically do a triathlon and then get all
that is
this?
So awesome. I really feel so lucky to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Because I really live in this awesome community, like 3 miles from Dana Point in Southern Cal. And that's exactly what I do. I run to the ocean. I did it yesterday. I run to the ocean, and then, you get super hot because it's when it's sunny here. And then I just run right into the water and swim, and it's amazing. And then sometimes Carol comes and joins me, and sometimes I ride my bike down there and ride home from it. But it's a lot of fun.
I love it. And I love you for giving us that little tidbit before that, because sometimes we need that reminder that it's okay to have, a day off of fitness or a day, the flexibility. You said the word flexibility, and it was perfect.
You got to be focused on the goal, right?
Yeah.
So there's times like I told Carol just yesterday, I think I said, okay, I'm done traveling. I've got to write these different projects. I got this project to finish. But I said, get all those things done, and then I have a lot more control over my schedule, and it's just maintenance then. And I said, we'll be able to get back into, I love exercising every day. I mean, but it's a luxury, that's a luxury to be able to do that, unless it's your priority. Like you guys are, I think, are fitness coaches too, right? So for me, it's a luxury. It's a blessing to be able to do that.
Well, I would say it's a big part of your identity of who you are. It's one of the things that inspired me so much about you, and really the routine that I continue to keep. We're fortunate. We're in Las Vegas. So throughout the summer months, it's very easy. Like in the mornings, it's easy to get up because it's not cold outside, right? To get out the door, to go for a run, to come in, I hit the gym, then I hit the pool. It's nice when the pool is nice and warm, right? And I swim a few laps, and much of that routine is around, what you shared as far as running down to the ocean, jumping in the ocean, because I know when I was in prison, it was a luxury to take a 10-minute shower, right? Like you don't even get a long shower. And I said, when I get out, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a point as often as I can get in the water and just spend some time. But there is a difference. Like my routine in the morning alters depending on the day. I got to make sure that I got enough sleep first. But then the second thing is, I'm in the habit now of I check my emails, like what came through overnight, what are the things business-wise that need to be done, touch those, come up with my plan, and then I'm out the door. I get out the door, I get my run, and if I have time for a longer run, it is a luxury. If it's only the short loop, back, couple quick sets, hop in the pool, 2 laps, bam, I'm out, then I still got it in and I still feel that sense of accomplishment. And then there's those other days where I know I've got a little bit more time. And earlier this week, I told Ro, she said, did you swim this morning? I said, I did. And I said, after my last lap, I just kind of floated. I just laid back and floated for a couple minutes. And I haven't done that enough to where I've taken those moments to reflect, to be in the moment, to enjoy it. Because there is, I know, and I'm sure you share this too, like there's such a drive, such an intensity to go and to hit those goals. Sometimes I need a little reminder. She's great about reminding me like, hey, you need to breathe. You need to eat. You need to, you know what I mean? Take that breath. So I'm very fortunate to have that support.
Yeah. Living in gratitude is super important.
Yes, very much so. So, man, that's, we're about to celebrate 3 years in August. You're celebrating 10. A lot of big changes, a lot of amazing things that you're doing right now. I know that you have a new project that you're working on. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. So I've been working with the Bureau of Prisons to bring these courses. Well, I've been going into prisons since around 2017 or so. But recently has really expanded a relationship with the Bureau of Prisons, which has a very closeness to my heart, I think, because I grew up in prison, got married in prison, and in the Bureau of Prisons, and there are a lot of people serving long sentences that my heart is still with them. So I'm glad to be able to bring these courses in to prisons, and now we reach several 100,000 people. But the reality is, there's not always enough funding from the institutions to cover how much literature people need. And so we have a nonprofit that my company funds, but I also go out and look to try and get individuals and businesses to sponsor. And so I've launched this new project that it's kind of like you could think of a LinkedIn for people in prison. And it's a collaboration between our nonprofit and also I get university interns to join us. And if I could share my screen, I'll share it with you because I actually featured you on the homepage. So I can walk you through this program. Let's see, desktop one. I think I'm sharing now my desktop. So can you see this desktop?
Yep, there we go.
Okay. So this is Prison Professor's Talent. And I got inspired for this particular project because of a podcast I listened to from the CEO of Airbnb. And you see there you are in the middle. So these are three guys and I learned this because a lot of times I go into prisons and this is under development right now. So I'd ask you to look back at this in a week or so because it's really being developed right now. I go into prisons and a lot of people think the First Step Act doesn't apply to them. Well, I don't know if any of you know Halim Flowers, but he went to prison at 16 and was serving a double life sentence, and he's now home and an incredibly successful advocate and just an inspiring force. There's Adam Clausen, who is serving 213 years. A lot of people would say he didn't qualify for the First Step Back, but he's now home, father of a baby and husband to Roe and community leader. And this is Tommy Walker, who was serving, I think, 3 life sentences at Lewisburg. And he is now home and leading a successful life. So I try to take these stories and show people that regardless of where you are right now, the reason that Halim is home, the reason that Adam is home, and the reason that Tommy is home is because they put themselves in a position to be a great candidate for successful release when the law changed. And as somebody who's very active in advocacy, I am always striving to bring more changes to the system, such as the reinstatement of the U.S. Parole Commission, or making earned time credits available for everybody in prison, or a federal work release program. And through all this, that requires many moving parts. So what we have here are scholarships, and the scholarships make it possible for people to participate in these programs regardless of their ability to pay anything. And I get to, and this is all in development. So I think that one of them that's being shown here is like a sample. So like a person, like this is a sample, that's not a real person, but it's a sample where we would feature the person's profile. We would plug his information of where he is. And then all of the courses that I have, they'll be lined up on this sidebar here. And the people will be able to get lessons for free. And when they get these lessons, they can write their responses to the lessons, and they would profile them right here. And if somebody wanted to see well, that's just the student's response, and somebody wanted to see the original lesson, they could click here, and it'll actually take them to the original lesson. So it is a project that I have in development. But what I do is I take inspiring stories like yours, and I will show how this work creates good neighbors, not good inmates, and we're really building an advocacy campaign on that front by documenting how it influences the culture of confinement, how to create plans that will lead to a successful outcome, how this work will lead to employment upon release. And so we'll even develop relationships with employers that would say if somebody is documenting what they have done, they will stand out to have a job or a possibility for a job with these institutions. So I'm super enthusiastic about this program because we could offer it at scale. I've got college interns so just like you have access to the, people in federal prison and in state prisons have access to this kind of quasi email system. They can do the lessons, send the lessons to through core links. Our college interns can go in there, grab the person's response, and then publish it on Prison Professor's Talent. So now think, Adam, how much work you did while you were in prison during the 25 years or so you served, right? It would have been phenomenal to have memorialized every class that you did, every class that you taught, everything that you created, every book that you read, right? Well, of course, it costs a lot of money for somebody not everybody has a row in their life, unfortunately, that's there to publicize their story. So I want to make this available to anybody who has access to the internet or access to core links or to the program that's in prison at no cost. So my company sponsors it, but then I'll go out. My intentions are that I'll go out and I'll find, individuals and businesses to sponsor it as well at a really low cost. So that, they can sponsor a person for like $15 a month or $100 a year, which basically covers the cost of building what I anticipate will become a very scalable site. And I want to use these stories to profile. So like I'll be able to take your story, Adam, and create a lesson plan around it, show how people could contact you. I know that you're doing something pretty exciting right now in the insurance space. And I want to be able to show 400,000 people who are in prison when they come home, hey, how could they sign up with you? How could they potentially be a partner with you and collaborate with you? And what can they be doing in prison to advance their prospects for success? So this is something that I'm really enthusiastic about building in the months and years ahead, because it will allow people that may not have a huge network of support while they're in prison to build one on their own through merit. And then I can take the data that's showing how many people are preparing for success upon release and counter arguments from people like Governor DeSantis, who is trying to repeal the First Step Act, and I need to have 10,000 people that are showing, hey, there's 10,000 people that could be like Adam. And, it makes no sense on both a human factor, as an American story, we need to document this. So I'm really enthusiastic about this program. I look forward to featuring your story and sharing it with people, as I already do, but I want to teach people, how do they become more like Adam? How do they become, more resilient, more gritable?
More gritty. That's right.
I love this.
Yeah. I dreamed about what you're talking about, Michael. Like if you said, I wish everyone had a row, and what she did and what I subjected her to.
It's true, and you will pay me back every single day for the rest of our lives. But that aside, as dedicated as I was and as much as I did, there were a lot of courses that Adam taught, or things that you did not get credit for. And it was after I came into the picture, or even sometimes during, and there was just nothing I could do to, like you said, Michael, memorialize that. So I am so obsessed with this. I love this so much for all of the reasons you listed and more. Now, let's say I'm a prison wife, or, my son's in prison and I just stumble upon this episode. Is there a way for me to reach out, or how do I get in touch with you if I want my loved one's profile on that website that you're building? Can they even?
So right now, what I have, here's my path now, right? Like everything is in stages. So it's in prototype development right now. I had to get the Bureau of Prisons to approve it. And I've got approval in one region, but I expect to take it national. And So what I do is it costs quite a bit to build the site and then to maintain it. So I only have so limited numbers right now, which is why I'm getting sponsors at either $15 a month or $100 a year per person. And what that covers is the fee that the wage that we pay college interns to go in there and grab all the information and publish it. Because I can't get an API. I wanted to create an API that could go directly into Core Links and pull the information and automatically populate the site. But I can't get that from Core Links. So I have to do it more creatively. So I hire college interns. They go in there and grab it and publish it. And I have so many resources, but I've got like thousands of people that want our courses right now. So I work with the reentry coordinator in the prison, and I tell them, give me the list of the people that you want on the thing. And I need to build this site with like maybe 300 people. Once I have 200 or 300 profiles on there, which will take me not very long, a couple of, maybe a week, I'd guess, to get them all published up there. And then now when I take those, now I've got something better to go out to businesses and say, look at how many. And my goal is that I'd like to get 10,000 people on there within, a year or so. But I've got to raise capital to do that. So it's incremental stages, because I don't really want any inmate paying me, because most of them don't have money. I want Coca-Cola to sponsor it. I want Verizon to sponsor it. I want McDonald's to sponsor it. Mm-hmm. And I want to show them what they get. So I can do that by building 300 profiles. Then it starts to become a more powerful, potent message. But if somebody wants to be on there and they're in federal prison and they have access to the course, we send them the courses. So they just have to send an invite to interns at prison. Is it Prison Professors? It's Prison Professors Talent. So they'd send an invite to, let me see if I can put it in the chat, to your episode here. It's interns at Prison Professors Talent.com. Boom. If they send an invite from prison to that email address, our intern will accept all invites, and we then put them into a queue. And I think we've got several hundred that we can give away right now, because I'm sponsoring those. And so, like, if somebody in your audience wants to do it, that's what they do. They'd send the interns an invite to interns at prisonprofessorstalent.com. Then they just have to send the information. I think it's name, prison location, registration number, mailing address, mailing address, city, state, zip. Of course, that's on bop.gov. Sentence length, gender, demographics, that researchers would want, gender, security level. I think that's it. 7. Oh, and the date they started their sentence. So we could measure how much time they have in and kind of project how much time they have to go. Now, the nice thing about that is we can collect really good research, because if we show how many people are really memorialized, like, let me ask you a question, Adam. How many books did you read while you were in prison?
Hundreds.
You see, a better answer, and it would have been an answer had I connected with you at the beginning, okay? It would have been to say, every time you read a book, and that's one of the subjects in the course, every time you read a book, you create a book report. And that book report you memorialize. And so you'd say, why did I choose to read this book? What did I learn from reading this book? And how will having read this book contribute to my success upon release? 3 questions, no big deal. But if you wrote that for every book you read and it was all memorialized, you'd be able to say, oh, I did 20 years. I read 50 books a year or 30 books a year. So I read a total of, whatever that is, 600 books, 1,000 books, whatever. And all of them were memorialized in book reports. You would use that as almost like a resume builder to validate why you are worthy of release, why you are worthy of a job, why you are worthy of support. And the more you build to document or memorialize your journey, I have found that stronger you are in overcoming challenges.
Oh, 100%, Michael. Because if you look at the books back here, these are the books that I read. and Rose seen it. I have notes on those books, a lot more on some books than others. But that's why I'm so excited about this for two reasons. One, personally, to be able to memorialize it in the way that you're saying. But the second part is that research. Like, I'm a research nerd. I'm always looking for how do we compile all this information. Like, I had to go out and find the success stories. You're pulling them all together. These are going to be best practices. What are people doing? And it's going to cause a chain reaction where it's going to inspire others to say, well, I saw Michael Santos did this at FCI McKean when he was there. So I'm inspired. I know I can do this thing wherever I'm at. Like, you can't tell me it's not possible. He already did it. So I'm excited to see that next evolution. And I feel like this is the way to get there, to inspire people by informing them and by documenting this whole journey.
Yeah, and I want to add this. Something that you said earlier really stood out to me, where you said that you had to get something along the lines of the BOP's permission or work with them. And that's why it's so important for people like both of you to be doing this work, because you're the subject matter experts. And if this was just some researcher coming in doing this, first of all, they wouldn't have known to do that, right? And so for years, for me, when Adam was inside, it was, there were things that we were using that we loved and we poured our time and energy into, and it could have been like here today, gone tomorrow so many times because the BOP would pull the plug on things because they didn't approve it. So you knew to do that, brilliant. And then as well as that, compiling all this research, and the three of us are research nerds, right? But there were so many people that came to me throughout the course of me doing all of my stuff with strong prison wives and families, and they would ask us, I want you involved in this study and that study, and a lot of them I would turn down because I was like, we're not lab rats, we're not circus freaks, we're not here for you to just compile all this data for whatever you want to do with it. But in instances like this, and people like you that came to me with that kind of stuff, absolutely on board, because number one, you're one of us, right? You guys did your time. You guys know you're there to help. And number two, like you said, it can help you turn around and say, look, all this data, this is why you need to change the law, or not turn around the law that you already, implemented, and now you're trying to pull the plug and all of that. And it's amazing and it's brilliant. So to everybody listening that, you're like, whoa, collecting data, whoa, research, I don't like this. This feels awkward. I was and still am in those shoes, and I turn a lot of people down. But this is one where you can say with like my stamp of approval, yes, you want that research collected. You want that data done, or the data collected and the research done.
And I would say so much so, I love what Michael said about finding those businesses to sponsor individuals. And we had briefly talked about this, but you brought up what we're doing now as far as insurance. And I don't know if you and I had talked about this, but I took on a new role, Director of Innovation and Social Impact, for an organization called Social Purpose Corrections. Big picture, we're looking to transform the culture in U.S. corrections. We're going to do that by focusing on staff wellness, increased programs, resources for the population, giving both everybody that lives in those environments, lives and works, training them in the coach approach so they can build relationships, professional, co-creative relationships that are mutually, based on compassion and mutual respect, all of the things that allow people to become their best selves and to feel like they're stakeholders, they have some agency in their future. Big picture, that's what we're doing with the organization. I was asked to lead a national initiative where we are looking to connect individuals coming out of the system with private healthcare coverage under the Affordable Care Act. We partnered with a national insurance agency, partnered in all 50 states so that we could do this, because I knew from my experience, when I walked out the door at 21 years old, I didn't address any of the real underlying issues. And what happened was I went right back to the drugs, the alcohol, all of those things to mask it, because I didn't have the support and I didn't have the resources that I needed. And had I had those things in place, my life might have gone in a very different direction. I would hope so. But by now being in a position where when we help people get insurance, they're going to have access to mental health services, substance misuse, treatment, and also the physical component. I'm still walking around with a couple issues from the Bureau from, back in the early 2000s that didn't get addressed. Not the greatest health care on the inside, regardless of where you are. So if you want to have long, healthy lives like we're promoting, you need to have a good healthcare plan, having access. So that's what I'm leading this national initiative to do that. I'm focused on the individuals themselves coming out of the system. That's what I do with the organization. At the same time, just as we've done for so many years, Row is looking to serve the broader community, all of those families, all of the friends, all of the underserved community members who are along for the ride. They're part of this as well, but they're not being seen. They're not being heard most of the time. So she started a separate company specifically to make sure that they're being reached as well. And that's called Our Connect. And through that, Michael, I think that's where we would really like to contribute and be able to give back to those scholarships a portion of what we can generate through our work with you. How does something like that sound?
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I mean, your guys are really just getting started in the sense you've been home for 3 years and you've got a new baby and you've got a lot to do. And I want you to be successful first. It's very, there's that analogy that says when you get on an airplane and a stewardess says, or a flight attendant says, if you're traveling with a child and something happens, you make sure that you put that oxygen mask on yourself first before your baby, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. I want you to be successful. And to the extent that it ever grows and there's an opportunity for you to contribute to the nonprofit, that's awesome. I'm really glad that the first time I spoke about prison professors' talent to anybody other than the Bureau of Prisons has been on your show. So it's a first here as well. I mean, this is still very much in development, but we've got the site coming along. I'll have some people profiled on there relatively soon. I'll be taking this episode and publishing it under your profile. I'd love to help people coming out of prison that are looking to get insurance, to know how to contact you. So make sure that you share that with me so I can plug that in your profile. And if some of them want to get involved in working with you or collaborating with you, they can do that. I think we're all mutually aligned in wanting to improve outcomes for all justice impacted people. And I don't want you to think about taking anything off of your plate to help me. I want you guys to take care of yourself first, and we'll do that together. We'll just stay aligned in the mission.
Thank you. And I want to add this because my heart has always been with the wives and the family members of the people that are incarcerated. So despite, your loved one might have a life sentence, they might have a really long sentence, they might still have 10, 20, 30 more years to go. But if you're not taken care of, right, just that oxygen mask analogy that you just used, if you're not taken care of, then you can't help take care of them. And my dream with Strong Prison Wives and Families, aside from supporting, from my experience, loved ones of the incarcerated, was one, to provide legal services, two, to provide mental health services for those women and men and children who are on the outside waiting for their loved one who's on the inside. And so with our Connect now, I actually have the resources and the ability to provide not legal services, we're not there yet, but mental health services, drug or substance abuse, misuse, disorder, rehabilitation services, those kinds of things for those people. So yeah, that's something I would love to promote to those people as well. Those people who are still incarcerated, for their loved ones to get a hold of if they need to.
Well, we'll certainly do. We'll get you through on. We are in more than 200,000 tablets right now through Adovo. We're in every state prison in California, which is about 100,000 plus people in prison. And then right now every prison in the North Central region of the Bureau of Prisons. So we will do our best to let people know about the amazing work that you and Adam are doing, and hopefully give them a pathway to connect with you when they're ready.
I love it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Michael, this has been probably, this might be my favorite episode yet.
It's your first.
Yeah.
First live, but we have a few under our belt.
First live episode. Yeah. So, I mean, we picked the right person to come in and to make this first. We really appreciate you coming in, Michael. Looking forward to taking a trip out there to see you and Carol very soon. And for all of you who tuned in, man, it's been another incredible episode here on Gritability, the power of perseverance, overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds to attain the life of your dreams. Michael Santos is living his dream. He's inspired us to live our dream. Adam Clausen, your podcast host.
Ro Clausen.
And we are signing off.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.